Hello, welcome inside the Scores Table special live edition here. Brian Haenchen, Danny Riego here, ready to wrap up what feels like an entire week, Danny, but really was just 2 days of games, Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, it was. And it was like on a weekday. And there was so a lot of people, it's the Friday, it's like the end of the fiscal year. I was sitting with a couple of people that needed to get home between games so they could get some work done. So it's not just basketball that made it seem like a long stretch.
Absolutely. We have a great show lined up for you. We're going to be joined by Hamilton Southeastern seniors Addison Van Hoesen, Kayla Brinley. They, of course, teamed up on the game-winning play against Lawrence Central, which we'll talk about here in a minute at the Hall of Fame Classic. Then a little bit later, we'll have Snider coach Reggie Tharp, young team over there at Snider. I got a chance to see them Saturday. Danny, I know you did as well, but they have a really special talent there, a freshman, Janiah Cooper, who's been playing at a really high level for them lately. So I'm excited to talk with Reggie about that. Let's dive right in, Danny, with the Hall of Fame Classic. I'll play some highlights for us while you and I gather our thoughts, and then I got an opening statement, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, cool.
That what you saw there were highlights from Hamilton Southeastern, Lawrence Central. Hamilton Southeastern wins it at the buzzer, 52-50. First win in over or about a year, I guess, for Lawrence Central. Hamilton Southeastern remains undefeated. Danny, I'm just going to start it with this. I'll read what I wrote in my Insider following up from that game yesterday. I think I've communicated as much to you, but my big takeaway from that championship bout was that the Royals won that game more than the Bears lost it. Both teams played exceptionally well, leaving no reason to doubt their status among the state's best. HSE found production beyond its big three and made the extra play at the end, and that was ultimately the difference. That was special what we witnessed Friday at Newcastle. So rarely do those top-ranked matchups deliver on the hype, but this one most certainly did, bringing a state finals atmosphere to a game in late December as the two nationally ranked heavyweights exchanged buckets and stops. It had everything you could have asked for. It could have gone either way, and both teams should be celebrated. That was kind of my big takeaway from what we saw. I mean, they lived up to the billing. They confirmed that they are, the two best teams in the state. We knew that on paper, but to see them go head-to-head like that was phenomenal. HSE got a big lead early. LC battled back, and you just kept waiting for that big run to come from LC. And every time it did, and it kind of started to form, HSE found an answer. And, man, it was just – we talked about it before the game, but just how cool was that? And just so awesome to see that, especially in such a prestigious event like that.
The earlier game against Holmes, when Lawrence Central played Homestead, on paper was supposed to be a great game too. I know Mollering is out and we'll talk about it, but LC ends up winning that basketball game by 25. So you're approaching the night championship game between HSE with LC and LC with this idea that we haven't seen since Garrett, McKenzie, Lampley, and Abdurkey have been in the starting five. We haven't seen a team in Indiana beat them. We've seen a couple of teams get close. Lawrence North got close. Center Grove got close. The only team to do it was George Rogers Clark, and we talk about it ad nauseum. I mean, they should have won that basketball game. I think they ended up giving it away in the last couple of minutes. So you're approaching this night game being like, well, can HSE beat them? And I think really early in the first half, they match up. But for me, the takeaway was the execution of the game plan. I think there's a blueprint that's been put out there over this great run that Lawrence Central has had. And I think HSE implemented and executed a game plan, not necessarily based on what they do well, but based on what they think they needed to do to beat Lawrence Central, and they did. So for me, that's the big kind of global 30,000-foot takeaway.
I think we'll talk about the shot here in a bit, but let's talk about what HSE did defensively. I looked into the numbers a little bit. LC shot 36% from the field, which matched the season low. They went 7 for 25 from 3 and had 11 turnovers. I'll be honest, I was not expecting that from HSE's defense. They were really good. I mean, everybody was defending, everybody was bought in, and they executed the game plan that Sat and company had drawn up to perfection.
Yeah, so a quarter court pack line switching man-to-man defense. So let's just talk about it for a second. So the founding father of that is a coach by the name of Dick Bennett, and his son, he coached at Wisconsin, and his son Tony Bennett. God, I hope I didn't invert those names. No, I had it right. So the son Tony Bennett, he goes on to University of Virginia, coached very ironically a Lawrence Central great and Kyle Guy. To a national championship, and famously they had that they had the 116 loss also, but both coaches, Dick Bennett and Tony Bennett, and kind of popularized and made the pack line defense fashionable. And if you want to study it, that's kind of those are the coaches that you would go to. Now, the pack line, you can set the pack line wherever you want to set it. You can set it at the 3-point line. You can set it at most people set it at about 17 and 18 feet. If you watch that basketball game, HSE dropping into the pack line and switching everything, the design of the defense is to congest the paint, is to limit opportunities. And one might say, well, why don't you just play zone instead of this intricate kind of switching defense? HSE, and I heard this from more than a couple of credible sources, I mean, they were concerned about Lawrence Central's ability to crash the glass. But when you are in a pack line matched up man defense, you are now matched up on your defensive rebounding as well. So now you can crash 5 to the defensive glass, no matter how many LC crashes to the offensive glass. And they felt like they needed to win the rebounding war. Now they didn't. I think LC actually had more rebounds.
31-24.
Okay. So, but it didn't completely get away from them. I mean, and the rebounds were loud. Stidham had 7 rebounds in that basketball game, and every single one of them felt like it was a huge play in the basketball game. And to get 7 of them, I remember Brinley getting a defensive rebound, and Maya, who will talk about how LC kind of limited her, she used a rebounding to get involved and get her hands on the basketball as well. But that's a little bit about the pack line D. Before I throw it back to you, I will also point out that HSE has Kennedy Holman. Kennedy Holman is somebody who Coach Satterfield and HSE in the past have used to apply a tremendous amount of ball pressure to change the basketball game. They took one of their best weapons, which is Kennedy Holman on the defensive side, dropped her into the pack line, and that is a huge act of trust in one of your best players to take away one of the things that she does really well to execute a game plan. And quite frankly, it worked because statistically, LC shot more threes in this basketball game, 25, than they previously had in any other basketball game all season. So there was something about being in the pack line, congesting the paint, limiting driving opportunities that HSE did. Now, if they make those shots, that's a different outcome. But they didn't with the frequency that they needed to. They just didn't. And the pack line worked. And we saw it with Center Grove in the postseason tournament last year. And we saw it this year with HSE and man-to-man.
A couple numbers that stand out with the LC shooting. They shot 30% from the field in the first half, improved it to 42% in the second half as the team kind of went back and forth, and they started to hit them a little bit more consistently. I feel like it was Jayla and Lola kind of got going a little bit there. They had the 14 offensive rebounds, like you mentioned, but they were only able to generate 12 second chance points, which feels kind of uncommon for them with just how efficient that Lawrence Central offense usually is. And obviously off nights are going to happen. I don't take any big sweeping, takeaways or anything like that from that, but it speaks to what HSE did. And it confirms what I think we all have felt coming in, is that there's some favorites and some real front runners here, but everybody's beatable in 4A. And that's for the game. It's great because it's going to make for a really fun tournament here in a few weeks. It's just great. Sticking with one more stat for me, Danny. It was interesting. I didn't notice this till just now as you were talking, but 5 starters from both of them carried the weight most of the way. Ant Green, Abby Brown played double-digit minutes for HSE. LC, they got 16 minutes out of their freshman, Amaya Sowell, who's going to be a really talented player. But other than that, it was the 5 starters best on best going through almost that entire game, man. I mean, just, again, everything that you could have wished that game could be. It was all that and more.
It is really difficult in a game like that to get bench production, because it's just such a weird atmosphere. It's a different atmosphere, okay? But let's look at the HSE side of things first, okay? I think the first play of the game, if my recollection serves me correct, is I think it was a Van Hoesen and 1. I think, and gave them a 3-0 lead. They got an early Brinley 3. When Ant Green came into the basketball game, one of the first times she touched the basketball, she hit a 3, okay? So now when you're subbing through this rotation, when Hooks and Brown are coming into the basketball game, Van Hoesen and Brinley and Green, and all of these people are kind of rotating through those 2 spots on the floor. Now, they've made a play early in the game. Now they're engaged, okay? The heavy lifting in the middle of that basketball game, remove the last possession where Brinley hits Van Hoesen for the game winner, and then I think it's like 8 points there in the middle. That's 10 points. They're going to score 52. And there's 42 right there. And if you look at the box, Stidham, I think, had 12. Holman had a team high 15. I think Maya got to double digits in just 10. But I think that's like, it's like 90% of the heavy lifting was done by those players. But I think the bench production that HSE got, obviously in the last play of the basketball game, but also early in that basketball game, I think was really critical to just settle them down. And then when the game really kind of hit its rhythm, then you started to see Stidham and Holman and Makalewski kind of beat them.
That was, for real, I think, the most balanced box score, I think, from all 4 quarters that I've ever seen from HSE. Like, even dating back probably to previous seasons, where I know the numbers aren't super glamorous, but just in terms of production and the big shots early, like you mentioned, they got kids going early. And that I think, and we'll talk to the girls about this later, but I think that was so important for building and instilling the confidence for later in the game, like you mentioned, to get them ready for that moment so that they're ready to deliver. I'll toss it back to you for one thought. We should probably talk about Maya Makalewski, Jalen Lampley, obviously the Miss Basketball component there, but to see those two go head to head, I'll let you talk about them, and then we'll move on to the third place game, which was also phenomenal.
Yeah, Pete, I don't know if people are going to use this as an excuse. I think we have to go back and look at precedent, right? What have voters done in the past? Okay. And I very commonly use the Noblesville Bedford North Lawrence Hall of Fame Classic that we had. Was this last year?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. I'm sorry. 2 years ago. Where Reagan Wilson hits the game winner, makes the first team all-tournament team. Chloe Spreen wins the MVP and goes on to eventually win Miss Basketball. But in the middle of the season, I think there were a lot of people who were discussing, well, Reagan's team won the Hall of Fame and all of that. So I think that's for the voters to decide how much they think that this matters. If we see it again, Makalewski versus Lampley, I think it would be relatively obvious, to see them play at Gainbridge and to make a conclusion based on that. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to make a conclusion or not a conclusion. I don't think you can. Okay. But here's what I'll tell you. Okay. What your eyes tell you. Okay. And what the resume tells you could be two completely different things. It still comes down to how you define it. Okay. Look, Maya in the event, okay, and we talked about the 10 that she had 35 in the morning, okay, but Lampley was really good in the morning too. Like, let's not forget that too. Shot 5-11 from 3. She made 25 points.
5 of 11.
And that wasn't against like some consolation opponent that they were trying to get. It was against Homestead, okay. Yeah. So both kids, I think I can say this, and we'll get into Noblesville and what Tipner's doing, and we'll get into Columbia City and what Baxter's doing, and we'll get into Brownsburg and what Gordon is doing. But I think these two kids have probably, I will say, I think people are going to want to distinguish between the two, but let's travel them in a pack. I think with the way that they performed, maybe it's one of these two, okay? Lampley and McCluskey, and maybe the competitiveness that they had on the floor, which was so fun to watch.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
We just hadn't seen it. Maybe that for the moment, and this is 100% recency biased. I am a prisoner of the moment because I just watched it for an entire day on the 27th. But maybe those two, maybe there's a little bit of a gap there.
It's just, and two, I should mention that it's one of those things. And I thought about this too, and I saw what Addie did, and we'll talk about her later, but it's just fun watching this senior class go. You know, it's like they've been waiting for their turn, and now it's here, and they're taking advantage and just doing insane things, phenomenal things. We have 10 minutes here before we bring on our guest, Danny. So let's talk about Homestead-South Knox. I'll start with the South Knox discussion. They went 0 for 2 at the event, but the HSE game felt a lot closer than what it did during it when I think HSE got the lead out to 12, 15 points. It never really felt fully comfortable with the way that South Knox defends and can run their offense. And then against Homestead, they led most of the way in that game. Homestead just found a way to make some plays at the end. Whitney Ankenbrook had a phenomenal bounce-back game after being limited to 2 field goals, but South Knox, not unlike Lake Central last year, came in with a big chip on their shoulder, kind of wanting to send a message and tell everybody, hey, you should be paying attention to us. And man, they're as good as advertised, and they're really fun to watch. And that was the takeaway in talking with Satterfield and with Rod Parker. It's just, I mean, that's a really dang good basketball team.
Yeah. So what a great event, first of all, that, you know, you have HSC and LC and number 1 versus number 2 and 2 nationally ranked teams, but then you have such relevance in the consolation game between South Knox and Homestead. You know, and speaking with Holly just very casually and after the basketball game, I think they like their position. I saw a couple social media posts saying that they were the biggest conclusion that they drew out of it is that they're
read.
Yeah, I did read. Yeah. You know, so, but it was, I think South Knox probably had, I don't want to say the most to prove. I would probably give that distinction quite honestly to HSE, because if they get blown out by 25, this is a very different conversation and a very different morning. But I think South Knox needed to validate themselves just for their own being. But the reason why I say HSE's performance was more important is because, look, you could tell really early, South Knox is the best 2A basketball team. They're so good because to be able to compete with LC, HSE, and Homestead and to be in that field, I think says a lot about what they are. So I asked myself the question, why? Okay. So I you know, on one hand, I look at South Knox and the first conclusion that I have in watching them collectively was Kendall Hill's better than I thought she was. That kid's really good. Okay. And I was actually sitting with a mid-major head coach that coaches in a conference and does a great job, by the way. They validated that. I mean, I had a whole conversation about Kendall Hill and the things that she does and, you know, her athleticism and her height and relative to her production and her performance, the fact that she was guarding EPs, things like that. So I think she's better than I thought she was. I know that was the first time that a lot of people in the Indianapolis area and even associated in Indiana girls basketball had maybe seen her. Kendall Hill, your thoughts?
So good. Like, just the way that she runs the point for them was phenomenal. She had 15 points, tied for the team high, 8 assists, 4 steals in the opener, then had 20 on 8 of 13 shooting with 4 threes, 8 assists, a steal, and 5 rebounds against Homestead. I mean, those are two high-quality 4A teams that she's doing that against. Listen to her talking about how she runs point, and it kind of fits into that larger discussion of what makes South Knox special is the way that they're able to rotate her and senior Ella Bobe. So if things are getting a little too tense for Kendall, like she said, we can switch spots, and I can say, okay, Ella, it's your turn. I need you to help me out here. And then Ella pointed out, well, when there's a slower defender against Kendall, we can play the matchup, and she runs point. She's able to drive and attack and get by there and take advantage of that matchup. So, I mean, they're thinking at a higher level than what maybe you'd expect from a 2A school, and their ability to take advantage of what they have with those two in particular is phenomenal. But I had Kendall on my all-tournament team, or at least on the fringe, because you're limited to so many spots. But she's so good, really impressive for the first time seeing her, and it really rounds out that lineup that they have over there at South Knox.
Yeah. When we talked about Kendall on past episodes, we talked about how sometimes she goes out there and leads them in scoring. We talked about how sometimes she'll have a line that's, and it's not an exaggeration to say that it's a triple-double, like 12 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, okay? But I'll use the 10 assists to kind of transition. It is so hard to be able to get 10 assists in high school basketball because somebody has to make the basket on the other side. Okay. And that's kind of where I go is, yes, you get different renditions of Kendall Hill and when watching different South Knox games, but you also get different renditions of who they are, particularly on the offensive side. I mean, the Coombs kid, I think didn't the Coombs kid, like she's threatening the 3 p.m. record at South Knox.
That sounds right. Yeah. I think she probably got it.
Yeah, I think she probably got it too. I think in between games they were talking about how she just needed to make maybe one to tie or something like that. I don't remember the box to see if she got it, and I apologize. I think her first name is Delaney. I apologize that we don't know that information. But I've seen Brent Hill lead them in scoring. I've seen Coombs hit multiple threes. I've seen Madison Parrish and Brent Hill do their thing. Kendall Hill, and then the Indian All-Star candidate I even mentioned in Ella Bobe. This is a basketball team that has a lot of let's just say ammunition. I mean, there's just a ton of people that Kendall can pass the ball to. No wonder why she gets 10 assists is because if you just make the right play, you're by and large throwing it to somebody that can make a play and get a bucket. And, that's a very difficult thing to do against a really good basketball team. And they struggled against HSE. They got off to a bad start. And look, is some of that, oh my gosh, this team is a lot longer and a lot more athletic and a lot better than we thought. I don't know if any of that is true, but as the games went on, I mean, if you remove the first quarter of the HSE game, they were really, really good for 7 quarters. Really good for 7 quarters. In fact, they led Homestead for the lion's share of that basketball game before Homestead just took it from them in the end because Whitney Ankenbrick went nuts. But I think this is a complete basketball team. My takeaway is how many different ways that they can beat you, particularly on the offensive end.
Really good. And then, I mean, defensively, too, they can throw so many different looks at you. That's something that HSE pointed out. That's something that Rod Parker spoke glowingly about as well. The different ways that Holly can throw them. And you saw it. I saw it too. I loved that after the Homestead game or after the HSE game, they were back out there already, kind of going through a walkthrough, addressing a couple things right after the game. And then they're out there like an hour and a half before the game, again, going through some things, figuring some things out. And I think just a really well-run ship. And I will honestly be shocked if we don't see them in Indianapolis here in February, March. I guess.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Man, I think they're gonna dance into Cambridge. They're so good.
Give me your one thought or an overview or whatever you want to take it with Homestead before we get to our HSE conversation.
I think they miss Carly Mollering. I hate that to be the first thing that I say. Does she make a difference versus LC? Absolutely. Okay. Does she make 26 points of difference against LC? I don't know. Okay. But it gives them another ball handler outside of Epps. Look, Homestead's going to be fine. They're going to be really good. This iteration of Homestead, okay, the one that is halfway through the season, the one that doesn't have Carly Mollering, I do give a edge to HSE and Warsaw. Okay, so I think there's an asterisk on that opinion. I think that's one thing in watching. The body of work is big enough now that I feel confident about HSE and Warsaw. And we will see Warsaw play Homestead coming up, okay? But let's reserve all of our rush judgment, my rush judgment, for when Mollering gets back, because they look different. I think they just look different. Yeah. And then I think the second thing that I would say is there was a direct relationship between Homestead's performance and Maya Epps' performance. Okay. Now I can say this because I know Lonnie and I know Maya, and I think I can get away with saying this. Okay. The performance in the first basketball game by Maya Epps was probably below her own expectations. Okay. But as she got cooking, okay, Homestead got cooking. And that is all due respect to how I feel about Gabby Helsum and Whitney Ankenbrook and Delaney Nolan, Olivia Fry, and all of those kids, McLaughlin, playing chunk minutes. Okay. But when Epps is going, okay, when Helsum is making threes and Ankenbrook is making threes, it's almost like Homestead is using those threes as like trading punches with their opponents. I kind of felt like that. Okay. But when Epps is cooking, those are your jabs. Then those Ankenbrook and Helsum threes, those become knockout punches. Those become haymakers. And I think that's one thing that you saw in the second basketball game in the second half was when Ankenbrook was what she make 6 of them. I think she finished with 28 or 29 points or something like that. I mean, she even gave the Caitlin Clark shrug after I think her 6th one. But those become big time, shots that put you on the mat. But so I think if one might say, well, why does Parker, it seemed like they could have maybe gone away from Epps maybe a little bit earlier in the first basketball game. I disagree with that take. Anybody that says that, because when you see them, when Epps is cooking, they just seem like they are a much more difficult team to beat, obviously. Okay. But I think she is still what makes everything go. But that's a good basketball team. And I think it was good to get that win against South Knox. And so Parker can go back to the drawing board, figure it out, and get a big win against Warsaw. And then, we'll see where they go.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, we're going to transition back now to Hamilton Southeastern, Lawrence Central. Danny, I'm going to show you my angle of the shot, and then we'll bring on our 2 guests. We are joined now by the 2 players responsible for that play, Addison Van Hoesen, Kayla Brinley of Hamilton Southeastern. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Yes. Thank you for having us.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for coming on. So I'll open the questioning with this. How many times have you guys seen that play, and from how many different angles? I mean, I follow you both on social media. It seems like you've been getting tagged in it at least a lot. How many times have you actually watched it, though?
Oh, so many times. Like every single time somebody has posted on their story, I feel like I've rewatched it.
I've definitely lost count. I can't remember how many times.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So for those who haven't heard, I would love for the 2 of you to just talk us through that play, how you saw it. You guys get the ball with like 1.6, 1.9 seconds left, tie game, trying to win it. Just talk us through that play and how you guys saw it unfold.
I mean, mostly just like it all really just like set up perfectly. So with Kayla taking it out and then Maya setting the screen and Kayla having like Kayla Stidham coming across the baseline, faking it, like calling for the ball. It was just like a perfect screen and then the perfect pass over.
Yeah, we definitely knew that, everyone on the floor thought the ball was going to Maya, KK, or Kayla, so I think it was a great call by Sat to recognize that Addison was going to be the one who was open. And so we used Maya and Kayla as decoys, really. And I think that was also a great call. And obviously Addison was the first look and it was there. So it was a great play by Sat. It was a great execution by the team. It was just a great play.
So stay there for a second. So sorry to jump in here, Hank. So
you're good.
Kayla, you had kind of mentioned it about some of the things that Sat was saying. You talked about the play, but talk about the timeout, the conversation, because as this, and to set the stage for the audience, right? They get the turnover. There's 1.6 seconds left, sideline out of bounds, game tied. Okay. So HSE calls timeout, draws up a play. You guys come out, set it up. Coach Lampley at Lawrence Central counters when they see your alignment with another timeout, and then you guys go to the bench. Talk to us with what you can share. Talk to us about that the actual timeout, the conversations that you guys were having in the first one, the second one, and what you guys saw in LC's alignment.
Yeah. So we definitely, coming out of that timeout, we were solid. And that really didn't change through either timeout. We knew what we were going to run. We were pretty confident. I would say really the only thing that changed was that second timeout when they obviously, the first time they had, a girl about my height, maybe a little taller, but then the second one, they came out with 6'2" in front of me. So that was definitely a little more challenging. But I would say that, we were still pretty confident in the play we were running, and, it worked out. So.
Kayla, we talked after the game, and you knew Addison was going to be there and ready, right?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Addison, did you have that same mental connection, I think, as Kayla described it?
Oh yeah. I mean, I knew she could get it there, so we were just hoping for the best that it would go in.
So Kayla, as soon as you throw that pass, do you think that Mackenzie's going to come over and pick it off, or did you know as soon as it left your hands, like, oh, I nailed this?
So I definitely, I see they switched it. I saw Addison open, but I was definitely a little nervous that it was going to be shorter than I expected it to be. But, it definitely worked out, and it was far back enough where she could still catch it, like perfect, just catch and shoot. So it worked out.
And Addison deserves some props too, watching it back. 'Cause, I mean, you had to keep your balance as you came back down there and then have the wherewithal to get that up quick. I'm sure that was really impressive to see. For both of you guys, I'm curious, how important was it to kind of get involved in the game early, like getting some of those early shots in the first quarter and just kind of getting your legs under you at the start of the game? Like, how did that impact your confidence later?
It definitely helped settle some nerves, like early baskets and moving the ball, like being able to start the game off strong definitely helped.
I would agree with that. And I'd also say that it helped sort of the team. I think when we're all contributing like we were, I think that we just sort of, we back off of each other's success, and it just ends up getting the game rolling more in the direction we would. And we sort of saw that early. So I think that those early baskets really helped us get where we needed to.
Defensively, what you guys did against Lawrence Central was really impressive. If you could just talk us through just generally what the approach was defensively and what you guys took away from that performance.
Since we came off, this was the second game of the day. With scouting and stuff, we didn't exactly get to go through our normal thing, but we talked a lot about it before the game, and obviously on the bus ride home from the first one, just having a pack line defense. We knew their goal was to try to drive and get those easier layups, but focusing, playing defense together, getting in those gaps and bouncing off of each other definitely helped.
Kayla,
was there?
Go ahead.
Stay with that. So stay with that pack line there. I mean, and I know she's not on, but just kind of speak for her. I thought a big adjustment in going to the pack line and dropping the pack line inside the 3-point line was what you guys did with Holman on the ball and Green. I mean, a mark of your basketball team has traditionally been, especially last year, maybe not as much this year, but still, is the ball pressure that both Holman and Green can apply on the basketball. But you guys dropped them into the pack line as well. Can you just talk about some of the individual? Were there individual things that were talked about in the locker room, like, hey, we're going to do this with Lampley, or we're going to do this with Holman and Green, we want you to pick that up, or is this just a kind of a blanket thing? And so you guys set the pack line at 17 and just go from there. Just kind of talk about that. I'm obsessed with this because I think it's changed you guys as a basketball team. I think you guys have become a better basketball team because you guys can guard. We know your offensive proficiency, but this move to kind of this pack line for you guys, I think has really vaulted your standing and made you more competitive in a game like that. So can you discuss the Holman Green and the ball pressure or the different individual scouts?
I definitely think that we didn't really have as much time. We obviously scouted South Knox before, but when going into LC, we really just knew that their goal was to drive. So we planned on doing the same thing for everyone, trying not to make it complicated, because eventually when you're switching onto a Lampley or you're doing one of those things, you know, it could get hard for people who didn't start on them to remember sort of what they were doing. So we just sort of blanket statement said, we're just going to do this pack line thing, and it worked out really well.
How has this team evolved defensively? I mean, Sat called that your guys' best defensive performance of the year, and that's what he was most proud of coming away from it. How have you seen that side of the game grow over the past 2 months?
I mean, obviously, for years before, we've been known as like an offensive, like being really efficient, but especially preseason and now into practices this year, we focused a lot on like playing defense together as a team and like being in help side. And like I said earlier, like being in those gaps. So instead of playing individual defense, like I'm guarding my person, it's more about guarding the ball and like sticking together.
I have a question that, you know, I kind of take it off of the beaten path here. Okay. I don't know. I'm not in that locker room, but you hear a lot of people, a lot of whispers, and then you watch the interaction between Coach Satterfield and Coach Huppenthal with the different players, with each other, the construction of the game plan. There's certainly some different concepts on the offensive side that we're starting to see. You know, he seems to always have a player. Huppenthal always seems to have a player individually coming into a timeout, coming out of a timeout. There seems to be a lot of cohesion and a lot of chemistry between those two. I'd like to hear each of your thoughts on this. When you bring a state championship coach like Chris Huppenthal and make them the assistant coach to Brian Satterfield, it draws attention. Can you guys just talk about what he's meant, Coach Huppenthal's addition to the staff, and what he's meant to this maybe ascension that you guys have had?
Why don't you start us off, Addison?
I mean, Hupp and Sat have worked really well together. Just the like process that Hupp has gone through to winning a state championship. He knows like what it takes and like the like process it'll take to get there. And then Sat has a lot of knowledge with like plays and like how we work as a team. So them two, like knowing the process and then knowing us, work really well together.
I would agree. I say that they work very well together. But I think the biggest thing that Hupp has added to our team is really focusing on the little things that, you know, don't show up on a stat sheet. Things like the blocking out, things like the setting the screens. That's a huge one. Like he really focuses on making sure everyone's executing their role the way that they should. And I think that's really where the biggest change has come in from bringing him in.
For both of you guys, what was the scene like in the locker room when you finally got off the court? Was there dancing, music, all the things?
We definitely soaked Sat in some water. That's for sure. He was drenched.
Addison, did you break down some moves in like a dance circle or anything like that?
You don't want to see me dance, but there was other people definitely breaking into a dance circle.
I think Kayla sold you out there. She nodded immediately there.
No.
So you have not seen the replay of your dancing then, I'm assuming.
No, I have not.
That's too bad. It's
well,
too bad.
When you watch the video, so Addison, you talked about like how you've seen the play now, you know, several times and it shows up on your feed. When I was watching it this time, and it's the same thing, you start to like look at different things. You're like, oh my gosh, look at this person's reaction. The first time I actually saw your mom's reaction, she was jumping up and down. She hugged your sister and things like that. So in watching it several times, is there anything funny out there? Is there anything that we need to see or like, oh my gosh, look at this person?
I mean, just like some people like standing up before the ball was even passed in, or I always see my dad with his hands like straight up in the air and everybody like hugging and like high-fiving each other. So.
Did somebody pass out during the celebration, by the way?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But she's okay now. Like everything's fine. It's just, she got, you know, that adrenaline rush. It's fine.
It was super exciting. That's, you know, just a little too exciting for her.
I saw that on Twitter. Somebody pointed it out in Clark's video from behind. I missed that in the moment, but I'm glad she's okay. And I mean, I guess that's an understandable circumstance to be so hyped that you lose consciousness. So I'll wrap up my questioning with this, and then Danny, if you have one more, you can. I guess just how have you guys as a team now? How do you move forward mentally? I guess like how do you ensure that this isn't the pinnacle of your season? Like, has focus already shifted to preparations for your next game and diving back into conference play? Kayla,
okay, I'll start. I think that definitely this game, it showed us a lot about sort of what we can be. I think that the contributions from everyone, a lot of people contributed scoring wise, but I think also defensively, seeing how everyone contributed was really promising to our future. We also had great energy on the bench, and the coaching was obviously amazing, preparing us for this game and like game time decisions. I think it showed us our true potential, but moving forward, we are like always on the next play, but I think that we sort of needed this game to see what we can be and sort of realize like what, like, I guess we could like, because that's obviously a huge game. So just seeing what we can accomplish when we're all working together.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It definitely showed our potential and what we can do. And like, obviously like in like postseason, like the things that we can accomplish. But it also showed us like a lot of the things we need to work on. So we'll go watch film, and I'm sure they will have a lot of things to say, even though it was still a great game and a great win.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Addison and Kayla, thank you guys so much for joining us. Congratulations on the win. Enjoy, I guess, you have a week off now, right? To enjoy the new year before you get back to it?
Yep, we do.
Yep. So enjoy the little break here, and looking forward to seeing you guys again here in a couple days.
Yep. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations, girls. Enjoy it.
Addison Van Hoesen, Kayla Brinley with us here on the scorers table. Fun stuff. I love that they've both watched that shot countless times and have lost track of it. And that was great too. Danny, the question about what different things they've seen, and Addison pointing out her dad with his arm straight up was phenomenal.
It was a great play. I mean, it wasn't an intricate action. I think, I think it almost surprised Mackenzie. Like Mackenzie's great. Okay. She's one of the best players in the class. She's got extraordinary athleticism.
So good.
I mean, when the game is tied, to go back to the actual play itself, there's not a ton of pressure on Brit. She can't throw the ball out of bounds, right? You can't have a change of possession, a dead ball change of possession where no time goes off the clock. Okay. And you want to complete it. Now she ends up dropping a dime, but the pass, like it almost, because it was so perfect, almost surprised Mackenzie. I didn't think that it was a horribly executed switch on the Maya diagonal screen. I thought Mackenzie was in a really, really good defensive position. That ordinarily she'll get that, but they say, another cross-sport analogy, a perfect pass is the best way to handle perfect defense, and I think that's exactly what that was. But to run it for Van Hoesen there, like I'll kind of share with you kind of what was going on in my section. I had mentioned earlier I was sitting next to a pretty accomplished college coach, and on the other side of me was somebody that also had college coaching experience. And so at the first time out, we were discussing, what do you want run? What do you run? What do you run? Okay, and anybody that knows me, okay. For me, Maya was taking that shot. Okay. I would have taken a fadeaway from the volleyball line. I would have taken a fadeaway from the corner. I would have taken anything just to get that, because it was 50-50. Now, does my mind change, with a different score? Perhaps. Okay. But at 50-50, I'll go ahead and go for that. Okay. But the college coach that is sitting next to me literally said before the basketball game, he goes, I would go to one of the role players here. I wouldn't go to Stidham. I wouldn't go to Holman. I wouldn't go to McAlusky. I would just, whoever they have in the basketball game, I would go to them. And me and one of the other people that had college coaching experience kind of looks at him and was like, really? And sure as heck, that's exactly what happened. It was executed perfectly. It was a relatively, like I said, basic action. You could tell when Stidham took her first step toward the corner and then Maya took her first step, you knew that Van Hoesen was going to fly. I mean, it's something that LC has seen several times, but it was just perfectly executed, and they happened to do it when they needed it most. So that's a big takeaway that I have just on that last play that I wanted to add. So it was really cool to kind of hear the renditions of the play from Addison and Kayla.
Read all about it at IndyStar.com. We have some really fun comments from them, just talking about how that play develops their relationship. They're really close friends. So some cool things there. Danny, let's transition to Noblesville yesterday. I'll save the Noblesville Norwell game for after the interview with Reggie, just because there's a lot to unpack there. But I would like to talk about Snider and in their day. The first game against Valparaiso was a little rough. They got a little bit closer late, but felt kind of like a learning experience game. Then they came back and played really well, it looked like, based on the final score against a really talented Norwell team. So an impressive response from them. They have a freshman out there, Janiah Cooper, who's averaging over 15 points a game, around 8 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 assists. I mean, just Reggie with those standout players, they just keep coming through there. He's got a great program going.
Yeah, he does. I mean, so to set the stage for everybody, he graduates Jordan Poole, who, many had as the most talented player in the class, best player in the class, candidate for Miss Basketball, Indiana All-Star, Purdue commit. And naturally, when you graduate that, you're going to take a step back. But I remember talking to Reggie, and I'll reference it in the interview. I remember talking to him back in June, and I'm not sure if Janiah Cooper had decided which high school she was going to go to yet, but the conversation naturally progressed into her. And they've been ready for this for quite some time. But I think it'll be interesting to get Reggie's perspective. Is the players are 2 very different players. Like Jordan Poole and Janiah Cooper are 2 very different players. So I'm interested to see how much of this is, inserting the new players into his old scheme, how much he's really looked at kind of changing some things around based on the different things that Janiah does really well, because those things are different things than what Jordy Poole did well. So, but yeah, you talked about Noblesville. I think Snider every week, you just never know which rendition of Snider you're going to get. I don't think you're going to get the one that's the sectional champ, big threat in regional, very consistently, but you'll eventually get to that point because this team does have talent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
the talent is there.
Danny, you couldn't have queued it up any better. We'll bring on Reggie here in just a second. We'll actually bring him on right now here as I try and get the screen situated. Reggie, what's up?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Great.
Reggie,
it's
what's
great
up, man?
Great to have you on with us. Thanks so much for joining us. You heard what Danny was saying about the pieces there, so I'll just let you 2 converse to start off this interview. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I asked the question to the screen. I'll ask it to you personally here, but you graduate Jordy Poole, okay, and then here comes another extraordinary state talent in their class, in the very minute after. Just talk about just globally, maybe that transition. I mean, the selection of the school. I mean, when did you know, that kind of thing? I think you and I talked in June, and she wasn't there. So I think I kind of asked, where is she? And you're like, oh, she's cool. She's going to be here, all of that. But just talk Jordy out, Janiah in, and then intermixing it with the pieces that you have. Just talk about that transition for us, Reggie.
Well, it was extremely tough because we couldn't play with Janiah in June. And that's where we tried to build a lot of our team chemistry in June. And, once here we work on the lottery system, and, her name was in the lottery, and that's completely up to the school system on when she gets in and if she gets in at all. So we didn't find out till probably mid-July that, we started accepting people in the lottery, and she was able to get in. But as far as the transition from last year's team to this year's team, it's a completely different lens. And I had to adjust my coaching style from looking at where you have these 3 or 4 seniors that know what you want to do, to putting in a new system, for different players. Because I don't think you make players fit into a system. I think you coach with what you have and your strengths. So, obviously, you're going to take some lumps, and there's some growing pains, and, there's terminologies that these girls have to pick up. And, it's a thing where you haven't been in this position before, even with the seniors. Like, we got 5 seniors. If you haven't been in a position before that you're not comfortable with, like, it's going to take some time to get used to, and, to go through the growing pains and the lumps. So that's been a thing that we had. Like you said, we have our ebbs and flows and ups and downs. Like, one week we look like one of the top contenders in the conference, and the next week we look like, man, what are we doing? And that's what you get with youth and inexperience. And especially, putting all of that on a freshman, as good as she is, it's a lot. And she has to learn to adjust and, kind of build around her teammates and get that chemistry going with what we want to do as a program.
Well, in that answer, Reggie, you said you coach to your strengths. To smart comment, what are your team strengths this year?
Like right now, I mean, that's what we were just trying to talk about in the coaches meeting afterwards. But right now, we like to get out and transition, and we like to run. And some of the same things that we like to do. We like to get something out of our primary break if we can, and then we'll try and flow in the secondary and get some options out of that. Our biggest thing is mixing Janaea in and up because she can do everything. We like to put her on the elbow, get her in the slot some, and then we'll put her on the block when we can get some mismatches. And with the shooters that we have around her, I think it works at times. Our biggest thing right now is defensively, like especially with Janaea. People don't realize she's 14 years old, and then you're throwing her into the mix with these high school kids and all these terminologies, and she's just got to catch up, and that's what she's doing right now. And I think that's what we're doing right now as a team is still trying to kind of figure it out. I know it's midway through the season, but I still think we make a run and make a big push at this thing if we clean up some things on the defensive end.
Yeah. Obviously, Valpo's a really good team, but I'm sure last night you got to be happy with how the team responded against a similarly really good Norwell team to keep that close. Looked like it came down to the wire.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think we were down like close to 20 in the third, and then we came back and made a run where I think we cut it to like maybe 6, and we were right there. And then just like a couple key possessions, couple key turnovers that, and they're such a well-coached team and with Eric over there that you can't afford to make mistakes against good teams. And that's been our thing. Like we've beaten everybody that we're supposed to beat. But when we play the talented teams, we got to find a way to figure out how to win it, just how to stay disciplined on our scout and then just close it out at the end.
Is that something that you can teach in practice, or is that just like experience, be thrown in the fire? That's the only way to learn kind of thing?
It's experience. Like we go through the scout and like in practice and everybody does it perfect, and then once you get on that stage, and the lights come on, like kids forget and, it happens, so like, that's what I said. Like you go from a team like last year where those guys knew what I wanted. They knew what I expected. And sometimes I didn't even have to call timeouts. I could just make the adjustment from the sideline. With this group, it takes a lot more patience, a lot more film study, a lot more teaching. It's been a heck of a lot of teaching this year with this group. But, I still think, we can make a push at this thing. It's ebbs and flows in the season, and the kids know that, and you guys know that. So, and the positive thing is we're still 5-0 in the conference, so we still have a shot at that.
What is the ceiling for the team? And, as you just global big picture.
The goal is always the same. Like win SAC, win sectional. I think we still have a good shot at sectional. I know we have, great opponents with Carroll and Northrop, but like I always try and find that moment in the season where there's like a turning point, and hopefully this can be it. Like you said, I think the girls need to get that killer instinct, like we were talking about Lilli Barnes all week and what we wanted to do and how we wanted to slow her up and things of that nature. And then once she gets there and you see her and smack dab in your face and she's coming at you, like our younger players sometimes freeze up, So, like I said, it's growing pains. And I think the girls are doing great with the coaching, like their willingness to learn and listen and change things. They're doing great with that. It's just putting a product out on the court, and that's what we're trying to work on right now.
You really didn't hesitate either, testing them out of the gates. You go McCutcheon, Lake Central 1-2 right out of the gates. They go 1-1 with a really close game against McCutcheon and maybe one of the best players in that 27 class. I mean, the way that they've started, it seems like, there's certainly some encouraging signs, some encouraging things to build upon within that 9-7 record.
Yeah. And I mean, we had McCutcheon down 20 And you know, like you said, like I said, with the younger players, like it was Janae's first game, and you know, I think she had like maybe double-figure turnovers that game. But my thing with her is I want her to grow through it, and learn and kind of teach on the fly, because she's such a big piece to our team. I mean, she stuffs the stats for us, so I kind of teach her on the fly. In regards to yesterday, like when we played Norwell, I thought she needed some time on the bench to see things and see what was going on. And I mean, like she played 8 minutes and had points and 9 rebounds. So I'm sitting here like racking my brain. Like if you put a complete game together, like you possibly could have had 40 or 50, you know. But I think that time sitting her down, it slowed things down and kind of put in perspective what we wanted her to do and where we wanted her to be aggressive at.
Is she the type of kid who, when you do that, when you sit her on the bench and say, hey, this isn't like punishment, it's to help you grow, that she kind of understands that? Or is she still of an age where it's like, you know, I guess salty, for lack of a better term?
No, she's perfect. She's just like Jordan and Nay, like completely coachable, great attitude, high character kid, picks up stuff really, really well for a freshman. But it's just like I said, you got to go through that moment. And I think she's going through that moment now. With the growing pains, like you said, like we saw against Valpo, she had 7 points. Then you come out and you play, like I said, 18 minutes and you have 30 points and 9 rebounds. Like that's insane. And she's, the difference between her and Jordan is Jordan was a point and she was an extension of me. So she could control the game a little bit more. Janae is more of a wing 3. And where she controls the game at is like on the offensive glass, and then her ability to get to the basket and get to the foul line. Like I think she was 9 for 12 yesterday against Norwell, which is outstanding. So, you know, she's learning, and you know, you have those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this kid can be really, really great. And then you have those moments like, man, she's still got some things to work on.
You know, Hank, so he talked about the McCutcheon Lake Central opening. You guys have played Warsaw. I'm just looking at it right now. Warsaw, Columbia City. You guys came down to Indianapolis and played North Central. Carmel's on there. Yeah, gosh, Valpo, Norwell. And now you go into the Northrop, Homestead, Northridge. I mean, you never have time to breathe. This is murderer's row.
Thank God,
This
Reggie,
has to be one of the better. Yeah, this got a great job on the scheduling. Let me double back to that November 30th matchup at Fishers. So you're coaching against Riley Shellhammer. I'll point her out. Now you have Janaea Cooper. I mean, this is, you know, that is what a lot of people will talk about too, of our really special freshmen. You know, what was it like from a courtside view to just see Cooper and Shellhammer? I felt like you and Lauren got the front row view to something that we're going to see for years and years to come. What was it like seeing those two kids on the floor?
Oh, she's extremely talented. And what we wanted to do with her was just not leave her. And like I said, you can tell people stuff in the scout, and sometimes they just don't do it. But she's like, she's going to be another special one. I think this freshman class that we have across the state is just loaded. And it's just good things for the future. You know, like when you're looking at, you know, her, Riley over at Fishers, and then you're looking down at Homestead at what they have. You got Cooper. I mean, it's just talent overload with the freshmen. So the sky's the limit. We're looking forward to playing her for years out. I know she's going to continue to get better and better. And hopefully we will too as a team. I'm sure we will, you know, because a lot of our younger kids are taking their growing pains now. So it's definitely something to look forward to. And I know Janaea is going to be ready for the challenge.
Reggie, I got one more question for you before I'll let you and Hank kind of bring us home. You know, one of the conversations that you and I had maybe earlier in the year, I complimented how, you know, what you did with Jordy. You gave her a lot of central third ball screen, but when Jordy got rid of the basketball, you moved her a lot within a lot of your scheme. So you'll drop her down and you'll send her to the weak side. And she was always confident that she was going to get it back. And Reggie, there were a lot of possessions within your scheme where Jordy would touch the ball 2-3 times and have different options. Okay. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about going away from your system because of what the identity of your basketball team maybe doesn't have that, maybe that kid right away? So talk about what's going through your head from a scheme perspective with the different players and how much balance you have?
Well, the first thing that we wanted to do with this group is kind of simplify it. Like with that group last year, we had like 40 sets. and that's a lot to throw at a younger group. And there's different counters and there's different looks off of them. So what we did was this year we cut back on half of it, and we wanted to make sure that they understood it first and understood the counters. And then what we want is a lot of motion. We want a lot of movement. And we just, like, the biggest thing, like I said, is the understanding. Like, if the players don't understand it, like you can't fit every player that's a circle into a square peg. You know what I'm saying? So you got to make sure that they understand it through and through, and understand what their role is in your offense and in your schemes and what you want. Like, obviously we had to go away from a lot of the stuff that we did last year because it was point guard dominant. You know, it was pool dominant. So now, you know, we do a lot of stuff where we work in the slots with Janaea. We work the high-low stuff with her and another one of our bigs. And we do a two-man game with her and Parker, one of our better shooters. So, you know, I think each year you kind of you base it on what you have. And, you know, if I get a player similar to Poole back, we'll put some of those things back in. We haven't abandoned everything that we've done. But, you know, I think you coach to your strengths. And right now it's, you know, our strength is inside and we work out.
Reggie, I'll get you out of here on this, and I'd love to hear from how Jordy and Janaea have been doing in college. I know Jordy was dealing with an injury at the beginning of the year, but she's back and starting to get some minutes at Purdue. And then Janaea, looking at her game log, I mean, she's getting some big minutes out there at Bowling Green. Yeah,
it's funny. I just had dinner with her, Cece, and Tia, all four of them on Christmas Eve, and, you know, miss them. And it's crazy how fast you grow up from a year of college, and, you know, just hearing their stories. Nay was starting at the beginning, had an injury, but she's still getting like 20, 24 minutes a game. And Jordan, they have her on minute restriction until she gets healthy, you know, and that's killing her because, you know, she's just one of those kids that just wants to play, and she hasn't had to sit out this long ever in her career. But, you know, the staff at Purdue is doing a great job with bringing her back and taking their time and making sure she's 100% healthy when she touches the floor. But, you know, they're just great character kids. They actually came back to a practice and, you know, talked to the players during Christmas break and just explain them the expectations and the culture that we have at Snider, and then to try and continue that, you know. So it's, you know, we don't want it to end with that group. We want to keep bringing high character, high quality kids in and, you know, get back to the winning ways that we're used to. Like I said, I don't think, you know, the season, like, yeah, right now we're 9-7, but I still think we can make a run, and we still have Murderers Row coming up with Northrop, Homestead. Then you throw a Northridge in the mix, and then you got Carroll. So I'm excited. I want it. I just got to make sure the girls' excitement is where mine is. So we'll see how that turns out.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, best of luck to you, Reggie. I'm fully expecting to see you guys in regionals, probably semi-state again. Like, it wouldn't seem right without Snider there since I moved here. So I'm expecting that from you, sir.
I appreciate it. It's going to be tough, but I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Take care and best of luck the rest of the way.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Take care. Reggie Tharp, Fort Wayne Snider coach, joins us. Danny, I'll let you give a closing thought on Fort Wayne Snider, and then we'll play a little sound from Lilli Barnes.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned it. They always just seem to be there in the end. The process is just going to be a little bit different in getting there. You know, Jory Poole, he mentioned, you know, and I don't Donahue at Bowling Green, but I heard on a recruiting visit one of the coaches at Purdue say that Jordy Poole is the highest nationally ranked player that they have brought in to that locker room since Katie Gerald's. Okay, so that's first of all ridiculous context. Okay, to be put in that in that sentence with Katie Gerald's, but to lose that and then to replace it, you know, with a different identity. He's talking about different scheme and different players in different positions. I mean, and the comprehension, that's a big reset. And that's, I give Reggie a lot of props to that. and understanding the process and just looking at it, you might be like, oh, 9-7, they're way down, but this is still just the first and second inning of this game. And I'm obsessed. That's why I asked about Shellhammer down at Fisher's and just his thing. I'm obsessed with the progression of these just high value young kids, because, everybody just wants to make snap judgment on them because they see them one time and they're, whatever. You just have to let, Shellhammer and Cooper and Bassie and Wood and I'm not going to go through the big list here, but just Cooper, the progression of who she is now and who she will become, I think are two just very, very, very different things. And as we sit right here, that's going to be the man that's going to help her get there. So
I love too how he discussed and explained how, he kind of has to adjust his coaching style after having that senior class for so long.
More patience, he said.
Yeah, that changes a coach. That changes a man. But it's awesome. And it's cool too, the way that Janaea responded to, sitting on the bench and like, hey, it's not a punishment, you're learning. And just, that's unique for a kid. And understandably so. Human nature says, oh, I'm not playing, I'm being punished, I'm not doing something right, whatever, pout, whatever. But to hear that a kid that young, 14 years old, he said, already understands that the bigger picture is really encouraging.
Yeah. If you haven't seen her, go see her. I was in an event down in Hamilton, Ohio called the Winter Session. It's just like, I've mentioned it before. It's like a junior high event. Okay. I went to go watch her team play just because they were from Indiana. It was a national event. And I think it was like one down and back. And I was like, who's that kid? I was like, oh my, like, who is that kid? Like, she jumps off. I mean, it is remarkable how quickly you will notice her.
Another player you will notice really quickly, seamless transition again by me, thank you.
Killing it.
Valparaiso's Lilli Barnes. She had herself a nice little day yesterday, became the program's all-time leading scorer in the process. I was able to catch up with her after that Fort Wayne Snider game.
I think we came out and, after a loss, we knew, what we needed to do, because we lost last week, and we knew the feeling, and we knew that we had to come out and compete, and I think that we did really good just coming out and providing high energy and doing what we do on defense and all that.
With a relatively young team, with just one senior, how has the team's response been to losses this year?
It's been good. We know, obviously it's tough when we lose, but we know that we just need to come back and we focus on what we did wrong and just do better on those things. And I think we do a really good job at improving each game.
For you, how has your leadership role on this team kind of evolved this year?
It's definitely gotten a lot bigger, I think. Just making sure nobody gets down on themselves, communicating on defense, just bringing the team together. I think, it's definitely gotten bigger.
How do you like that role? Is that something that comes kind of naturally to you?
Yeah, I think it's definitely gotten a bigger role, and I've gotten adjusted to it, but I think it just comes natural with just being there for my teammates and helping them succeed.
So who else has been stepping up for you guys this year? Who's been impressing?
I think everybody has. Everybody's gotten so much better. Cadence Clark has expanded her game tremendously. Bree Fincannon, she's gotten a lot better. It's a lot, they've all gotten so much better.
I was going to say, I saw Cadence was making some big plays today. How has she developed her game? How's she grown?
I think last year I think she could always do it, but last year she was really confident in her three, and now she's getting a lot more confident with her pull-up games and actually getting to the basket and taking control of the ball, and it's gotten a lot better.
That was Valparaiso junior now, Lilli Barnes. Valparaiso, they fall to Noblesville 43-37 in the championship game. They're 9-6 on the season, but they came back from a 10-point deficit late in regulation. Kept that thing interesting down the stretch. Barnes had a double-double, 18 points, 10 rebounds, plus 4 steals as she becomes the program's all-time leading scorer. Cadence Clark had 10 points. Cheyenne Brown had 3 steals. Their young team, Valparaiso, similar to Snider, going to have some of those up and downs. And similar to Snider, they have a really, really talented player in Lilli. But, it's just learning process, and they'll be dangerous in sectional.
Lilli, when you're the alpha on a basketball team, you got to play both ends, right? And if you look at the nightcap in the championship game, and I know there were 2 games there, but if you look at the nightcap, she seemed to take a ton of pride in the Tipner matchup. I mean, she was guarded with Tipner. I think they were, maybe shoe contract All-Americans together. I think on the Adidas circuit, I think they know each other really well. But, Lilli's offensive prowess has always been known. and maybe some people had maybe questioned, not in a bad way, but you just watch these kids so much. It was going to be interesting to see how she was going to deal with the athleticism and the strength that Tippner provides. And I think Meredith would be the first one to admit, I mean, she gave her everything she wanted. I mean, there were a lot. She had a lot of help. There was a lot of team defense. I mean, Meredith would touch the free throw line, and suddenly there would be 3 Valpo players around her. But chasing Meredith all over the floor, I mean, so suddenly you got to guard the post, and she's going to crash the offensive glass, and you're going to run her off a floppy action, and then she's going to get out in transition. There's a lot of different things that you had to do. And again, I go back to the redundant formula that I always talk about. If a kid's going to get 20, you just want them to have to take 20 plus attempts to get there. And Meredith seemed to have to take a lot of volume in order to get involved. And at times, early in that basketball game too, and we'll get to the Noblesville side of things, Meredith's best value in that basketball game was just passing it. Early she's getting people involved, and she was, that was how they kind of jumped out. But what jumped out at me with Barnes specifically was her defensive performance, her level of engagement that she had in guarding Meredith Tippner.
I will use that as a transition to Noblesville. They won the first game in pretty dramatic fashion against a really good Norwell team. That one went to overtime. Noblesville escaped 73-71. Kate Rollins, who had a really great December, pulled out the game winner. I have video of that, so we'll roll that and then a little clip of Kate explaining that play because it's just a phenomenal answer. Kate, talk me through that go-ahead basket there.
Well, I had Tippner. I saw her kind of like tripping, and in my head I was like, all right, do I let Meredith go up and get it? And I was like, no, I got to take it from her. So I just went up and I had to take it for myself.
Perfect. Just excellent. Just excellent from Kate Rollins. Truly a perfect answer to that play and how she saw it. I saw Tippner go down. I thought, so I let Tippner take the shot. No, I'm going to do it myself. And she did, and Noblesville comes away with the 73-71 win. That was fun.
Okay. Kate Rollins making the play, great for her, okay? That's one of the most important, most notable players that will dictate the outcome of who wins the state championship. Kate Rollins, okay? And here's why. Donna has shown with it through the way that she's coached this basketball team. She is going to be scout specific, and she's going to be game specific with how she decides to guard people. And in the North, I mean, we've already seen it. She had a box and one quarter against Lilli Barnes, in which Lilli Barnes scores the last basket of the basketball game. And I think it was the only basket she scored in the fourth quarter of that game, I believe. Okay. Earlier in the day, she got a box and one assignment on Vanessa Rosswurm with Norwell late when she started to hurt him. We saw what Kate Rollins did in against Maya Makaluski, not once, but twice. Okay. So if you look at scout specificity per game plan, Kate Rollins seems to be the person that's going to draw that assignment. And Donna has shown you she will absolutely be okay with junking it. And that's the perfect kid to do it, because I don't know that I could come up with one kid that would take more pride in those individual defensive assignments than Kate Rollins. So to see her make a great play on the offensive side, same way that, that Kayla Brinley and Addison Van Hoesen earlier, allowed to stand on the podium and receive that notoriety. She deserves it too, because of all of the things that she does and her importance that is foreshadowed in the postseason tournament.
And Rollins too, December, you could see the offense kind of coming along, 11 points through 7 games. What I had her at 16 assists, 14 steals. That's impressive. And then 7 points in the final against Valpo. But defensively, like you said, that's where I was going to go next. If we didn't go there, was just, I mean, they trust her with some really big assignments like Maya Makaluski. Yesterday, it was the boxing one on Vanessa Rosswurm, which Noblesville did a little bit out of necessity with some kids banged up. And also just because Rosswurm's really good, and we'll talk about her in a second. But Kate stepping up is big for them. And in Noblesville, it's similar to last year, but the record looks better because they're not banged to all hell and sick. Because as you remember last year, I think they were 500 at this point of the season. Shoemaker was out. I want to say Tippner and Reagan were both banged up. Either way, they weren't in a good place. This year they're in a better place, but it's a younger team. So the record looks better, but in a similar place just in terms of their development and progression. And it's the emergence of kids like Kate Rollins stepping up. Cece Quigley's kind of continued her development and taken steps forward. And you can see the interview. Cece Quigley was in that interview as well, but you can see her progression now in the post as she kind of strengthens up and gets used to playing inside against older kids. And then Allie Hutchinson too, who just hit some timely shots. And then the freshman Maya Blower stepping in at point guard. So pieces are coming together for Noblesville, and the way that they're able to run those different defenses, I think it is a big game changer.
And Meredith is it looks like she's starting to trust it a little bit more too. And that's a difficult transition for her as she brings the rest of her roster along. But there was a stretch early in that basketball game in the first quarter when you watch it. I think Hutch hit a three. Grayson came in off the bench and hit a three. Hutch hit another three. I think a couple of possessions later, Quigley hit a three. These are all the names that you're bringing up. The best look that they had was the last play of the first quarter when Meredith drove left. They helped off a strong side corner. She kicked it to the corner. I mean, that's the last possession of the quarter. If Meredith shoots a contested shot there, I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. Okay, it's a Miss Basketball candidate. You're Indiana All-Star and maybe your best offensive threat taking a shot there. But help comes off a strong side corner. That's automatic. I mean, there's no absolutes in basketball, but if there are absolutes in basketball, that's one of them is when help comes off a strong side corner, you throw it there. She threw it. Now, Kate missed it. Okay. But the Tippner assist seems to be in the repertoire now for Noblesville. We talked about how Kendall Hill is just racking up assists. I think she has 3 triple doubles this season, and the hardest one to get in Indiana girls high school basketball is the assist because somebody has to finish it on the other end. Now Meredith's stuff in the stat sheet, but now if kids are going to start hitting shots, I mean, you can see it on several different occasions throughout that basketball game. Meredith would have a toe near the timeline, or not the timeline, near the paint. Okay. And the entire Valparaiso team would just congest on her. She's just going to have kids that are going to make shots. And in that stretch that proved to be enough very early in that game, 2 from Hutch, 1 from Grayson, 1 from Quigley, and a really good look from Rollins.
I'll pivot us now to Norwell. Showed really well against Noblesville. I mean, they're looking back and talking to Eric Thornton afterwards. It just, you kind of look and they're little mistakes like sideline inbounds were a problem. Some of those turnovers, you clean those up, you win the game and you pick up a big win. But it's same kind of thing as we're talking about with Snider, same thing we're talking about with Valpo. It's just kind of a younger team that graduated a ton. And yet, I think they're a little further along those other teams. But point being, there's going to be some ups and downs, ebbs and flows as they kind of figure things out. But first time seeing Vanessa Rosswurm since the summer, and my goodness, that kid is something else. I mean, she was really good. She had 28 against Noblesville, 27 against Snider. She did that against Noblesville with them running a box and one. And what really helped was Macy Salfrank stepping up with 19 points against Noblesville. She hit some big 3-pointers. But Rossworm's averaging, I think, about 24 a game, Eric said. Just playing phenomenally. And it's kind of funny as I throw it back to you, but he said she was their 3rd scoring option last year, understandably, considering the kids that they had. But he's come to find out that I guess she wasn't overly thrilled about that and put in the work over the summer to ensure that she was the number 1 scorer this year and that offensive catalyst that they need. As they fill in for the piece that they graduated last year, but just a really talented player who's grown in strides. And with the way the 3A North is setting up, it could come down to them in Columbia City in a semi-state.
Mm-hmm. We see Columbia City run dribble drive motion. We see Warsaw run dribble drive motion. But I don't know that anybody runs it as well as Eric Thornton's Norwell outfit. They're so good at it at space. And in order to run dribble drive, you have to have kids that can get to their spot. Now, you don't have to get by your defender. You just really need to – it's really based on creating indecision on help, okay? And if you're late on help, then you read. So if the defense does this, you do this, okay? Vanessa Rosswurm playing in that system last year, you could see, even with Felling and Feast, you could see that she had some explosion and could get by. But to have Solfrank now also who now I watched the game after the fact, and so I already knew Solfrank had a good basketball game and had a good tournament. So I was really just kind of watching her through this. That they're good enough They are good enough. I mean, Saul Frank adds another dimension to that dribble drive now and it wasn't just her getting kick threes. She was throwing to the dunker spot. She was getting to her spot. She was getting 2 feet in the paint. She was doing some things that I'm sure Eric Thornton has maybe allowed the scheme to work, but almost kind of coached into her too. You mentioned how Rosswurm maybe was upset that she was the third option. It's probably a very, I don't know, Macy Saul Frank. Okay. Mm-hmm. But to me, this is probably just kind of a wait your turn thing. I mean, she probably knew it. And she was in 7th grade. Well, Felling and Feast are there. I'll have my day. It's just not today. Well, now it's today. Okay. And she's done really, really well at it.
It's interesting on Saul Frank actually, because I think she played freshman team or freshman year, and it's just been kind of encouraging her to stay with it, because Eric saw this potential in her, and it's just been encouraging her to stay with it and knowing that, trust the process and you're going to unlock it. And now we're starting to see it unlock. So it's really cool in that aspect, Danny, building off what you said, to see a kid rewarded for that. And it's the same thing for Vanessa. You learn, you pay your dues playing behind Feast and Ross, or Feast and Felling. Yeah, you buy your time, you learn from them, you put up great numbers behind them too, and now your time's here and you're shining. So, I mean, 10-5 against one of the toughest schedules in 3A, and the only team to blow them out was Warsaw. You know what this feels like, Danny? This feels like last year when it was a blowout loss to Snider at Noblesville, and I want to say that was their first blowout loss of the season against a similarly tough schedule. And here they are again, which is just unbelievable to say, because they graduated, I think, 70-80% of their scoring from last year, plus seven dozen seniors or whatever it was. So Eric, just tip of the cap to Eric, who's just done a hell of a job with this group. And like we've been saying, the 3A North, as it stands now, is going to come down to them or Addie Baxter in Columbia City. It's
as good of a job that I have seen done by a coach with what they have. And Norwell's a threat, and they have the building. Obviously, the building is a very tough place to go in and play. But when you see Saul Frank and Rosswurm make seamless transitions with the graduation of Felling and Feast, and to be 10-5 and to take Noblesville in their crib over the holidays, by the way, to overtime, which is a really tall feat. It speaks to his ability to run a program. You talked about the freshman ball. I mean, Saul Frank's been running dribble drive on that freshman team, and then the JV team and the varsity, whatever her progression is. She's been running this system forever, and that's just the offensive side of the ball, okay? I mean, the identity of Eric Thornton's team will be that dribble drive and the three-point shot, but it's also going to be that odd front 1-3-1 that, we talked a lot about how Gibson Southern attacked it in the state championship, but everybody always they're going to have to figure out how they're going to attack that, because the best part of that the defensive scheme that Eric Thornton has last year was Vanessa Rosswurm, and she's back and she's better. So she's back. So that defense is still going to move and rotate very, very well. In fact, when you watch that basketball game, Eric actually gets the most demonstrative in coaching on those defensive rotations. He really does leave his kids alone on the offensive side. He really does just let them attack off the bounce in this dribble drive. As long as they're rotating, they can take whatever shot that they want, but they are still seemingly kind of working into these defensive rotations. They're going to be a very tough out. And if we see Columbia City Norwell, got any subplot with that one? Geez.
Yeah. I mean, and what's interesting too is that Norwell doesn't have the size. And I think obviously that's probably going to be a problem if you run into a Greensburg. We'll talk about here in a second, Silver Creek, etc. But Columbia City doesn't have a big either, a true post either. So it's interesting how their strengths kind of match up. Their weaknesses also kind of match up in that respect. I haven't dove too deep in the matchup, but that's really interesting. Before we move over to Greensburg versus Plainfield, Danny, I'm going to play some highlights from the Homestead-South Knox game. I realized we forgot those. Clark shot him. Might as well get some run out of him. Plus, that was just a really fun game. Sorry about the banner there. But yeah, again, South Knox, Homestead. That was a really great game. Danny, one other game that I wanted to deep dive on, and then we can take turns bouncing back and forth on the whip around. And that was Greensburg versus Plainfield last night in Plainfield. Greensburg comes away 53-51 win for them. A really nice win for one of the 3A frontrunners, 6th ranked team in the state. A good win over Plainfield. It was an interesting game from the aspect that both teams, there were moments when it looked like things were going to go sideways fast, both Plainfield and Greensburg. And in talking with their coaches, same takeaway. Really impressed with how they responded. Plainfield just kind of digging deep and finding a way to grind it out there in the third quarter. And then with Greensburg, the legs are a little tired, and they just kind of found a way. Jason Simpson said, the girls came over, they were tired. He's like, look, championship teams don't make excuses, basically. They find a way, and they found a way. And I'll start the conversation before I throw it back to you with this. A lot of credit for the way Greensburg defended, because they largely neutralized Hannah Menser and Berkeley Williams, the two cogs of that Plainfield offense. Menser had 14 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, but she did it with 0 3-pointers and had only 2 attempts unofficially from 3, which has only happened, I think, once other in her career. I think it happened her freshman year, where she scored in double figures without a 3-pointer. Obviously, that speaks to Hannah's ability to remain effective in a game, and just, what a great talent she is. But it's also a massive credit to Claire Larison, who they matched up with Menser through most of the game, and just her length and ability to disrupt things on our AAU teammate. And it was fun to watch those two go back and forth. And man, two really talented players.
Yeah, I think from the Plainfield perspective, so Greensburg comes out and they're face guarding Berkeley and Hannah. And it's not a triangle and 2, it's just a full face guard in normal man. And Plainfield started to run just their basic continuities. Okay. They actually got a layup out of it. But I go back to this. I love the Benj Menser block staff at Plainfield, because I think through what I have seen, this is the coaching staff that has maybe adjusted the best to what the game flow is giving them and I've probably seen them maybe 4 or 5 times. Okay. But you get the face guard and they determine really quickly, we're not going to be in this basketball game unless we can get some production from Menser and Williams. Okay. So midway through the first quarter, out of a timeout, they come out and they move Menser actually to the point guard, and they start running some action. Now, I don't know. I know like Keith Hollins runs what he calls tilt action, where he sets kind of the ball screen, not in central third with a high-low, but kind of sets it on a diagonal on its side with 2 players actually on the strong side, so you can attack the weak side where there's less defenders. Now, Berkeley was one of the kids on the strong side. So now you already are taking one defender away, and they hurt them. They hurt him on that. I think Menser ended up getting a basket the first time that they went to a little mid-range jumper that she's money at, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But then they got rolled, got a couple of free throws out that, and then they started dropping help. They got the fill up off of Berkeley, and then Berkeley gets a bucket. Like that's an on-the-fly mid-game adjustment in the middle of the first quarter, where they adjusted immediately to try to get their kids involved. So Menser doesn't get any points from the 3-point line, and that's fine. She still gets in the double figures because they just found ways to get her some volume. And I credit the coaching staff there, but Greensburg doing that, now it's their tempo. Okay. Now you're running some scheme conceivably that you've run before, but it's not the identity of your basketball team. I'm sure they don't want Hannah Menser running the point, because if you get volume now less players are touching the basketball and things like that, and the ball might tend to stick, and it's a big risk. But Greensburg forcing that action, I think, was a big storyline. But Plainfield answered the bell, and it's why this game was it a 2-point basketball game, 53-51? Yep. It's why it was so close. Plainfield's coaching was outstanding, especially early in that game.
And it was important too that Plainfield, it's a testament to Greensburg for executing the game plan, but Plainfield got some production from other kids. Ellie Stewart popped out a lot. Yep. She was making some plays defensively. She was making a lot of really good passes. I haven't seen the assist total yet, but she had to have quite a few, because it felt like every highlight that I tweeted began with an Ellie Stewart pass. They're close. They got some good looks. They got some high quality, some high percentage chances that just wouldn't fall. It happens. Nothing to really be frustrated about. And I mean, other than the Avon game where they blew, I think it was a 15 or 20 point lead and ended up losing by 3 at the beginning of December. Their other losses have come against Center Grove, Noblesville, and now Greensburg. And that's obviously no knock on Avon, but it is to say that at 10-4, those losses, for Plainfield, they're nothing to stick your nose up at or raise concern with. They're playing well against some really quality opponents. And, some other shots fall. They win that one last night. Now a really big test run begins with HSE and then the county tournament, which will probably take them through Brownsburg and Danville.
I think Plainfield has to feel really good about what the conclusions that they draw from that basketball game. Okay. And we talk about the coaching with Benj, Menser, and Block, but you also have to have kids that can execute it. Okay. And I thought their execution, I wasn't sure I was going to talk about this, so I'll stumble through this here a little bit, but late game. Okay. So Larison hits the 2 free throws, I think with 9 seconds left to put them up 53-51.
Correct.
And then Jason calls timeout, and you look at the foul count and you're immediately like, okay, well, they're going to give fouls because there's fouls to give. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the way that you deal with that and the way that you combat that is you kind of turn into and I'm talking to the other coaches out here, you turn into like a football team almost. Like you have to get positive yards. You have to move the ball down the field and create stoppages in the clock. So Berkeley grabs the ball and immediately just starts taking profit. Okay. You just got to get yards and move the chains, because eventually what's going to happen is with fouls to give, you need to get the ball deep enough, and you're not attacking the basket. You're just attacking the other baseline. You just need to get it deep enough where you can get it to a baseline out of bounds. They do that in 2 plays. Berkeley gets deep enough to get them a baseline out of bounds, at which point in time Benj calls a timeout. Now you have a baseline out of bounds where you can run a catch and release play where you can't give that foul, because now you're risking fouling them on the shot. They executed that perfectly. They ran a look. They used Menser as a decoy. They ran an elevator screen where they threw over the top. The pass was executed perfectly. The catch was executed perfectly. The shot just didn't go down. But the execution was absolutely pristine and perfect, both by the coaching staff and by the players in just that 9 seconds. And that is a microcosm of what they're going to do. And that's why I like Plainfield late, is because not only are they going to put a good plan in, but in these little kind of episodial situations within a basketball game, that was something that was they had to determine that and implement that in that 60-second timeout with 9 seconds left, down to at home against one of the 5 best teams in the state regardless of class, 6 best teams in the state regardless of class, to execute like that in that last 9 seconds really, really, really stood out to me, because I think a lot of people just, maybe don't know what to do when there's 3 fouls to give, and 9 seconds. A lot of times that game ends with the ball, somebody dribbling it out.
Reminiscent play too to what HSE did against LC, where you have Hannah Menser coming across, drawing her defender. You have Berkeley Williams and another player setting the screen, setting up the wide open 3, look to win it at the buzzer. So like you said, Danny, just a really well-coached team. For Greensburg on the stat side of things, Leah West, friend of the show, 15 points, 14 for Larison, and then Miley Wilkinson, 12 points. Mary Harmon rounded out their scores, top scores with 9 points. Emma McQueen banked in a 3 as well in the third quarter.
My take-home points on Greensburg is they have a ton of kids that make winning plays. Okay, and this is the one that I kind of jotted down in my head. Okay. Greensburg missed the second free throw attempt with 3:30 left. I actually think it might have even been Larison. And it didn't seem like a big play at the time, but Leah West gets the offensive rebound. This was with like 3.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter of a 1-possession basketball game. Leah West grabs the offensive rebound, and it's 65 seconds later that it doesn't lead to a basket. It does not lead to a basket. Okay. But it's 65 seconds later that Plainfield touches the basketball. It just melts some of that clock away. I mean, at one point in time, that was a 50-45 game when with Greensburg in control and looking like the game is done before Plainfield kind of goes on that last kind of 60-second run to get the opportunity to try to win it late. But, that offensive rebound that Leah West had at 3:30 is just, that's a winning play. I mean, kids ask me all the time, Coach, how can I be in the basketball game late? Okay, I want to be on the floor late. I mean, the answer to that question is make winning plays. Okay,
Right.
like another winning play, Larison, right? She misses 2 free throws, which extends Plainfield's chances to win the basketball game, and then steps up to the line in a tied basketball game with 9 seconds left and makes 2. Those are winning plays, okay? When Larison was on the bench, there was a kid by the name of McQueen, and you mentioned that she hit the 3. That was a monster 3 in that basketball game. But you have different kids, Wilkinson hitting a big 3, West getting a kind of getting a pin down look with good looks, Larison getting an and one. We mentioned the McQueen 3. So this is a basketball team that I would say almost kind of very similarly to like a Homestead, have different kids that can hit you and hurt you. And that's a very difficult thing to deal with, particularly in 3A. Greensburg, to me, is starting to create noticeable and significant space between them and the rest of the pack in 3A. I think they're really, really good. And it just seems to be, we talked about it with South Knox. We talk about it with everybody. These teams that can beat you in different ways. Greensburg is definitely one of those teams.
I'll transition us now to a bit of a whip around. We have some games, Danny and I both, that we wanted to at least mention. Should start with this. We mentioned Kurt's brother, Stan Benj, Ben Davis, legendary coach, picked up his 700th career win on Saturday with an 82-19 win over Jacksonville. 700 career wins. He picked up number 701 against Purdue Poly Englewood. 31st year at Ben Davis, 38th year overall, 700 wins. That's a remarkable statistic. And in talking to Stan, he doesn't come across to me, at least I don't know him super well, but doesn't come across to me as a guy who's looking to hang it up anytime soon. He just keeps going and keeps winning. How about Columbia City? We mentioned them in this 3A conversation. We'll keep the discussion there. They go up to Twin Lakes. They beat Crown Point 63-52. They beat Chittard, which I was really interested to see how they'd handle that, 66-60. And they knocked off McCutcheon by 10 in the championship game, 64-54. Addie Baxter continues to move up the school's all-time scoring list. She put up 93 points across those 3 games, according to Sam the Man Frick on Twitter. 1,567 points going into the January 2025 for the Butler commit. She's 62 points off the program's all-time scoring record.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it several times with several teams. Look at HSE, for example, at the Hall of Fame. Maya has 35 on like 20 attempts in that first basketball game, and it was just an extraordinary individual performance. And then gave way a little bit in the nightcap to allow Stidham, for example, to get to 12 and get those 3 attacks. It's very similar with Columbia City too. Okay, Addie Baxter comes out and gets 36. I think I read on social media that was a career high for her. And then in the championship game against McCutcheon, I think Anissa Tonkel was the one that led him at the half in scoring. And so the development and the progression of these, and I hope people don't view this as a bad comment, but the development of the role players, kind of the secondary pieces, is always a huge storyline that we don't necessarily follow throughout the progression of a season, but we try to give you different things. I mean, we've talked about Addie Baxter 150 times on this show, okay, but Anissa Tonkel, this was a name that was recognizable. Yeah, maybe it's because Tessa was there and such a big part of the really good Columbia City team last year, and having the same last name maybe just adds a little bit of simplicity to saying that Tonkel's going to be is going to be one of their really good role players. But if you asked Addie at the beginning of the season, what is the most important part of the season, she would have said the escalation of performance that she could get out of her teammates. And she's seemingly starting to get that now from different places. So we know that Addie is really talented, but to go from really good to great you have to be able to uplift your teammates as well. And we saw it with Tipner, with Hutchinson and Quigley and all those kids hitting the threes, even Grayson coming off the bench. I'm getting long-winded here again, but Addie and Columbia City now are starting to solidify themselves as maybe, gosh, is it too soon to say that they're the favorite in 3A out of the North? I mean, I know they're up there, but they're starting to play some really good basketball. And their schedule is set up in a way where they're going to be battle tested and they're going to be ready to go. And to get performance from kids like Tonkel against a really, really good McCutcheon basketball team says a lot.
Absolutely. Columbia City, by the way, 13-3. They have Fort Wayne Carroll coming up to start the new year. Belmont still lurks. Fort Wayne Northrop still lurks. But they should be in really good shape going into sectional. Wanted to mention Northridge, and they continue to win. I was curious to see how they'd fare against some tougher competition this week. They went up there. They beat a ranked Floyd Central team, 58-43. They took down Penn in overtime. Penn hung with South Bend, Washington a couple weeks ago. So Northridge is flying under the radar. They were a regional team last year, right? Lost to Valparaiso at the buzzer, if memory serves. They're now 15-2. Doug Springer has his team on a bit of a roll here going since they lost to South Bend, Washington in a big heavyweight match in the middle of December. Really impressed by them. And 2-point loss to Homestead too. I should mention that. Rod Parker and I were talking about Northridge the other day. 2-point loss to Homestead at the beginning of the season. So definitely a team to keep an eye on out of the 4A North in a class that's just wide open. One other team, Danny, that I wanted to touch on before I throw it back to you to bring us home. Lawrence North is quietly starting to build steam. Actually, I don't know if quiet's the right word, but they're building steam now. They beat Brownsburg by a point, 49-48. Brownsburg hit 2 of 3 free throws at the very end that could have forced it to overtime if they got all 3, but Lawrence North escapes there. Then they go out to Ohio the next day and they beat Mount Notre Dame 76-68. A great win for Lawrence North, which has responded quite nicely. We talked about it on the show. I wrote about it in the Star. Really curious to see how Lawrence North would respond after that loss to South Bend, Washington, which is kind of a lackluster performance. And they've done that by winning 5 of their past 6, with the only loss coming by a point to that Lawrence Central bunch, which they'll see again here in a few weeks. And in between them, they'll have Hamilton Central, Valpo at Noblesville, and then LC again at home before they host Center Grove.
I don't have a great take on Lawrence North. I think, I had a couple of text conversations with Steven about it. I mean, they're just starting to play a little more grit. I don't know that it's a huge schematic change or whatever. I mean, they obviously have a really good showing. You talked about some of those games. I would go back and point to the game that they lost at Lawrence Central. And so I think I hate to say you want to win the basketball game. Okay. I mean, it's the point. You want to score more points than the other basketball team, but to be able to show the grit that I think was maybe absent in some of the earlier basketball games, I think is a big thing for Stephen Thomas and the Wildcats, because that is, they kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say they got away from it, but they had always been in these matchups kind of the tougher, more aggressive, more gritty basketball team. And we hadn't really seen that earlier in the year. Well, we're starting to see that now. And I think it's starting to be reflected in their performance on the floor and subsequently the scoreboard. And don't we get Lawrence North, Lawrence Central again? Like, don't we get it again here coming up in the next couple of weeks? Yeah. So that's going to be a good measuring stick for, quite honestly, both basketball teams. I mean, here's the one thing here. There's a couple things that we know about Lawrence Central, for example, right? We know that they're really, really good. Okay. We also don't know how they respond necessarily from a loss. I mean, again, the George Rogers Clark game, I don't know. I don't want to throw it out. It's certainly part of their construction of their empire and what they've become. But it'll be very interesting to see if Lawrence North can be really gritty with them early in the basketball game. And we'll see if there's any long-term effect from just putting it simply, losing a basketball game, because they haven't ever done. Again, I go back to it. Lampley, Abdur, Keeb, McKenzie, Kenter, Garrett. That starting 5 has never lost a basketball game in the state of Indiana before Friday. Like, that's nuts. Like, that's nuts. And it's not because they don't play really good teams. They do.
You said Lola, Anaya, and Kenzie.
Lola, yeah. The three. No, Lola, just the starting 5. Lola, Jayla,
Jayla played as a freshman and they lost games. And was
No,
on.
but as the starting five.
Oh, with
Jayla,
I'm sorry.
Jayla,
Yeah,
Lola,
yeah.
McKenzie. Yeah.
Sure.
Since that starting
My
five has been the
apologies.
starting
Sure.
five.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great
they
point.
haven't lost a basketball game. So
Mhm.
we'll get to see them bounce back. They have a long break, but yeah, I mean, but I think for the first time, I think Lawrence North probably loves flying under the radar and not being talked about.
Mhm.
You know, you said quietly. I actually do. I agree with you. I actually think it is quiet.
Yeah, I don't say that either, and I know Danny isn't either. Just to be clear, not like disrespectful quietly, because I think sometimes you can get like a negative connotation, like everybody ignores. But no, in this case, it's just they've gone about their business and they've won games, and you know they're going to get some more big tests here coming up. Pike too. Also, I should mention that I was talking with Keith yesterday. They went out to Michigan, Wayne Memorial, picked up a 57-52 win over them.
Is
So
Sanaya Smith back yet?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. But that'll change them when she comes back. And we talked about some of that tilt action that Plainfield was running. You know, Keith hasn't used a lot of the stuff that I know that is in his book because he doesn't have the personnel to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. But when Snider gets back, he will. And so they're going to be a tougher out too. And so Pike, I think Pike has HSE coming up. And the reason why I point that game out isn't because of what happened on Friday night at HSE. It's what happened last year at HSE when they kind of made that run. That's what really kind of ignited that sectional run for them, was that second half comeback that honestly fell short. I mean, they didn't win that game, but it fell short. It was at HSE. You're starting to see a very similar trajectory and a similar storyline play out with Pike.
I know you got to get out of here by noon. We've been doing this for an hour and 45 minutes now. A couple quick scores to mention. South Bend, Washington held on for a 6-point win over Carmel. Brebeuf Jesuit beat Marquette Catholic in overtime. That's a score that caught my eye. Laniah Davis, remember her from last year in their state run, 30 points, game high. Brebeuf on the other side hit 7 3-pointers, all of them in the second half. I know Brebeuf's been banged up. I haven't had a chance to see them or catch up with their coach yet, but they were hoping to get healthier as the calendar turned to 2025. But they're a team that when they're at full strength, they're dangerous. And then Marquette Catholic too. I mean, continuing to prove their prowess in Class A as a really good team. Yeah,
I think Jalen Bowling is back. I saw on social media that she got some minutes, so she's back from the ACL reconstruction and she's out there. So she, let's watch her progression, and we'll see if they figure in the mix. Doubling back to South Bend, Washington. I had this thought when I was watching the Carmel South Bend Washington game. The best high school shot blocker that I've ever seen in my life is Ariana Harris. She went to North Central. She goes on to, she was like summer teammates with Jackie Young, Lindsay Corsaro, McDonald's All-American. She was summer teammates with Dana Evans, who's in the league. She was a McDonald's All-American. Krista McLaughlin was on that basketball team. But Ariana Harris was the best high school shot blocker that I've ever seen. Kiera Reynolds is second. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I had always been very hesitant to put anybody in the same sentence as Ariana Harris. I will with Kiera Reynolds. And one of the things that hurt South Bend, Washington, that Carmel was able to exploit was they were able to get dribble penetration from the player that Kiera was guarding. I mean, they were effective when like Lauren Perry was attacking them. I know Mallory got a couple of downhill attacks too, but when you can get Kiera away from the basket, because she's such a formidable shot blocker and so good at protecting the rim, maybe attacking her as a blueprint to success. I know Lauren hit a 3, so Kiera's got to step out. Now she's away from the basket. And so if you can get by that first level of defense, sometimes with a ball screen, sometimes without a ball screen, that's something that can really kind of hurt them. That was one of the things that kind of jumped out. But that's a nice win by South Bend, Washington, because Carmel, I think, played really well. To the Carmel side of things, look, they came up a little bit short. But one of the noticeable changes through their progression is they've started to they're subbing less frequently. Like I think like Mackenzie Woods, she had a rotation where she would come out of the basketball game sometimes multiple times a quarter. Now she's only sitting like 45 seconds per half. So she's on the floor. And I've said this before. I think they're the best version of Carmel is when Mackenzie Woods is kind of in that kind of TJ McConnell role. Now, she's not going to stuff the score sheet with a ton of points. It's not what she does. She is a capable shooter. She is a capable scorer. But having the ball in her hands now allows their scorers like Izzy Shepard and Lauren Perry and I mean, and Mallory and all of these other kids to kind of step up, and so they have now resorted to the fact that they are maybe now a Mackenzie centric basketball team. And she was good. I mean, having to deal with the Raya Wilson ball pressure is not an easy task, and she was able to do it really well. It's not like Raya Wilson's defense was what significantly changed that basketball game. She notably, by the way, in one of those times where Mackenzie Woods went out of the basketball game, it was a 1-point basketball game. She comes back in, it was a 5-point basketball game, because they got an easy basket right away on a baseline out of bounds play in the spot that Keira Reynolds caught it, where Mackenzie Woods would have been playing in the zone. Mm-hmm. And then Raya Wilson, picked the backup point guard and takes it in for another basket, and Carmel has to call timeout and kind of reset. Mackenzie Woods comes into the basketball game, and then it kind of settles into its rhythm. So my take home for that is Mackenzie Woods.
Impressive showing by Carmel. I know I talked to Mike Armstrong, Franklin's head coach, before the season. He explained how South Bend, Washington came to be an event with a rebuilding Jennings County team, a young Carmel team, and Franklin, which is also going through a bit of a rebuild. And honestly, I went into that kind of not really paying attention to it. Then I looked down at my computer at Twitter before the Plainfield game. I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? So Impressive showing by Carmel. A lot of things to build off of there. One last note before we get out of here on the Class A side of things. North Central Farmersburg, who's going to be a contender down there in Class A, they're going to be up here in the Indy area next weekend. They play at a tournament in Covenant Christian, who's a solid team in Class A around the city. They'll be a factor potentially in the city tournament, at least in those early rounds. They'll play Cascade out of Class 3A in the second game of the day, 11:45 a.m. next Saturday, with the winner playing either Christian Academy or Covenant Christian. So that'll be one to watch. Jalen Davidson, by the way, just puts up phenomenal numbers, 24 points a game for her this year. She has really good support with Shelby C. and Hannah Step behind her. So Class A team, if you're looking to watch some Class A basketball next weekend, Covenant Christian, downtown Indianapolis is the place to be.
Cool.
That's all I got. Danny's got to go. I got to write. We thank you all so much for watching and for everybody who joined us guest-wise. I'll have some players who stood out, a dozen or so players who stood out, players of the week tomorrow. We'll do some year-end wrap stuff. There aren't many games before 2025, which is nice. So we'll have that. We'll do some features and things that I've been putting off doing. So we'll have all that for you. Danny, Courtney, and I will be back together at some point with a regular show. Danny and I will be back, obviously, next weekend, I'm guessing, with a weekly wrap show. We thank you all so much for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.